When I was younger and had more time on my hands, I used to volunteer one overnight shift a week at a charity shop in a major US city. It was one of those donation centers where people drop off old clothes, furniture, or junk they don't want anymore. Most of my job was sorting through piles of useless crap, organizing them in bins, tossing out the broken stuff, and tagging the rest for the floor. One night, I was sorting through a box of old VHS tapes. Tons and tons of older movies from the days before DVDs and streaming. For those of you too young to remember, not only were movies sold on tape back then, but you could also record your favorite programs to tape, or even buy camcorders to record your own videos to tape. One of the movies in this enormous collection was just like that, a blank black videotape. It had no title, just a date written on a piece of faded masking tape. July 14th, 1998. In retrospect, I don't know why I was so focused on that one. Probably because it was the only tape in that collection that wasn't an actual cinema film. To be totally upfront, we usually just toss those into the trash without further investigation, because nobody wants to buy somebody's old home movies, and there's always a chance it could be something inappropriate. However, I was working alone that night, and instead of just throwing it out of curiosity, I took it to the break room where we had an old TV VCR set up. I popped it in. The footage was pretty grainy, low quality, and obviously something someone had recorded for themselves, like a home movie. Whoever shot it was outside. They were in a park just filming things. Families sitting on blankets, kids running around. You could hear a man breathing behind the camera, whispering to himself while he was filming, panning across the scene. Right when I was about to press stop and eject the tape to throw it away, the camera stopped on a young woman. She was sitting alone on a bench, reading. She didn't seem to notice that she was being filmed. The camera slowly zoomed in and just stayed there, watching her face. You could hear whoever was filming this start to breathe heavier. The camera lingered there, and when I say lingered, I mean for a long, long time. It got to the point where I felt uncomfortable watching it because it was clear this woman didn't know this was happening, and the person filming her was a total stranger. Then, it cut to black. The screen flickered, and suddenly it was nighttime. The camera was moving now, walking through some bushes past illuminated windows in what looked like a backyard. It rounded the corner of a wall, and through the shaky frame I saw a house dimly lit. We were looking through a window on the first floor at someone inside. It was the same woman from the park. She was just doing regular things, picking up around the house before bed, unaware that someone was outside watching. Again, the camera zoomed in and you could hear this guy breathing. The footage cut to black again. Then it came back. The camera was now at the back door of the house. He was standing there, just looking at the handle of the door, waiting. Another cut. Now he was inside the house. A dim flashlight beam moved through the hallway, creeping up the stairs, and then clicked off. The camera silently floated up the stairs in pitch darkness, quietly peering into various rooms of grainy darkness. Then the camera turned and focused on what must have been the bedroom door. Cut to black. When it came back, the only light in the room was the moonlight through the window. The woman was asleep in her bed. The camera was filming her from the edge of her bed. You could hear the guy filming it breathing heavily, like his heart rate was up or something, even though the camera was just hovering there. The flashlight flicked on, landing right on her face. She stirred and shifted a little, but didn't wake up. Then, whoever was behind the camera began to moan just as the screen cut to black. I sat there, staring at the TV, feeling sick. This wasn't some old home movie, this was real. The next clip started, and the setting was completely different. The camera was stationary, like it had been set on a tripod. The same woman now sat on a dirty mattress in what looked like an abandoned basement or warehouse. The walls were cracked and crumbling, with fluid running down them and paint peeling. The lighting was dim, like a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. She was obviously terrified. Her face was bruised, her hair was a mess. She started speaking, but her voice was shaky, like she was repeating something she'd been told to say. She said her name, her age, and the date. I paused the tape and opened the door to the VHS slot. The date she gave was 2 days after the date written on the tape. My hands were shaking as I hit play again. The woman stopped talking. She glanced off camera like she was waiting for what came next. Then, a door opened behind her at the back of the shot, but it was blurry and hard to see what was happening. A figure stepped into the door frame, and it looked like a man wearing a mask. She flinched. He reached out to the side of the door frame and flicked off the light switch. For the next minute, it was nothing but darkness, but the audio kept rolling, like the guy didn't want to be seen or something. You could hear what sounded like the creak of the floor as he stepped forward, movement, a muffled male voice, and her whimpering and crying. And then she started screaming. Then the screen cut to black for the last time. The tape kept playing, but it was just static, like someone had deliberately recorded over what had happened next. I sat there in utter shock, stomach twisted, hands frozen on my lap. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just watched the last moments of someone's life. I locked up the store and took the tapes straight to the police, as well as the rest of the tapes from the collection, even though they just looked like regular movies. I thought they might be able to pull a fingerprint off them. And that was the last of my involvement with it. I never heard anything back from them, and they never came by to look through the store, nor made any request for further statements. The whole thing was unsettling and upsetting, and I cannot forget those images no matter how much time passes. I hope that it wasn't what I believed it to be, and that that woman is fine, living out her life somewhere. Or that they were able to find and bring to justice whoever filmed that tape. Since the internet came along, I've searched many times for information about this case and that woman, but I've found nothing. I've come to accept that I will probably live out the rest of my days never knowing what happened. I drive nights for a towing company. Sometimes I get called out to odd places, but honestly, for the most part, my job is pretty uneventful. I deal with a lot of angry people, so I have a pretty thick skin and not much gets to me, but the experience I'm about to share really shook me up. I got a call late one night from a company that owned an industrial lot on the edge of town. They said there was an abandoned car on the property that shouldn't be there and they wanted it removed. I'd been driving my tow truck all over this town for years, so I knew that area pretty well. The company wasn't physically operating there anymore, so nobody was actually on duty, but the lot wasn't completely deserted. There were a few motion-activated cameras still running to catch any trespassers. I think the cameras there essentially were just to detect movement and then relay that information to somebody else for review. There's a decent amount of crime in this area, so I get calls like this all the time. Anyway, I got the call and headed over. It took me probably 30 minutes to get there. I pulled up to the lot, and it was more or less what I expected. A mix of old warehouses and open space, and the car was parked near one of the rundown buildings. It was an older passenger car. The brown paint was faded, and the windows were a bit grimy. Other than that, everything looked normal at a first glance. No obvious dents or smashed glass or anything like that. But as I got closer, something caught my eye. The front seats were pushed all the way back, obscuring the back seats of the vehicle. It was a small detail, but in this line of work you see so many vehicles that you learn to notice anything out of place. I noted it as I hooked up the winch and started preparing the car for towing. As I was working, I couldn't help but feel for some reason that I needed to look in the back seat. I can't really explain it, I just couldn't get over how weird it looked to see the seat so far back like that. I stopped what I was doing, walked to the back of the car, and looked through the rear window. That's when I saw it. It looked exactly like there was a man lying in there, pressed flat under something dark. I couldn't be sure what it was at first, just that something was in there hidden among the worn upholstery and scattered items. I stepped around the side of the car, carefully pressing my face against the glass and shielding my eyes from the truck's headlights. It took a second for my eyes to adjust, and at first I didn't see anything except the lump underneath what was either a coat or a blanket. Then, suddenly, the fabric pulled away. Beneath it was a man's face, his terrified eyes looking directly into mine. They were wide and fixed, like he'd been caught off guard. Suddenly, he sat straight up, so fast that it scared me and I stumbled backward. His reaction was so immediate and intense I didn't know how to react or what he might do next. I put up my hands, took another step back, and yelled out to him that I got a call to tow the car. He just stared at me with this crazed expression, the only sound my truck idling. Then, out of nowhere, there was this explosive flurry of movement. It was intense, and I couldn't tell what he was doing. He started screaming like he was enraged. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but it was like watching somebody have a full-on meltdown. He was punching the seats and pulling his own hair and hopping up and down in the seat. Then he reached down, picked something up out of my line of sight, and a moment later, whatever it was hit the window with such force that it literally cracked the glass. I didn't have time to think. I just backed away, directly to my truck, got in, and reached for the radio. I radioed in that I had a situation at the lot and that there was a man in the back of the car who was potentially dangerous. I didn't wait for a reply as I turned back toward the vehicle. At that moment, the back door of the sedan swung open and the man got out. With one arm, he was holding a bunch of loose items against his chest, and in his other hand, I kid you not, was a handgun. He was screaming and pointing the gun directly at me. I lifted my hands and ducked down into the seat as much as I could, but I knew that if he really wanted to shoot me, there was not much I could do to stop him. Then, I heard him start kicking and smashing the front of the truck, knocking out one of the headlights. And then, as soon as it had started, it just stopped. When I lifted my head, I saw him running off into the darkness. I sat frozen for a moment, heart pounding, trying to decide what to do next. Then I picked up my radio and called in again, requesting police. Within 10 minutes or so, cop cars pulled into the lot. They questioned me, took my statement, and inspected the car. Later, one of the officers told me quietly that the car was linked to a home invasion earlier in the night. He explained that the owner had reported the incident shortly after midnight and that the suspect had been seen fleeing the scene. They believed that the car was used to stage a getaway or hide evidence for a crime that had just taken place. I was told to tow the car to an impound lot where the police would hold it for further investigation. I still can't shake the image of that man's eyes. I've been doing this job for over 20 years and I've seen my share of strange calls, but nothing like this. I still get chills when I think about how easily I could have been shot. I still tow cars and I still get calls in the dead of night, but I'll never let my guard down again. I always check twice and I never ignore even the slightest sense that something might be off. That night I got lucky, but I wonder what would have happened if I had just gone through with the tow without a second look, without even checking in the backseat at all. All I know is that I don't drive those roads without extra caution now, and I never forget the night when a simple job almost ended my life. Here's a story from my distant past, when my life was in a far bleaker place. I hope it can give a bit of context to what I'm about to share, and some hope that things can change. I was at rock bottom back then. I'd been in and out of jail several times and was living on the streets. I lived in a horrible city that was totally run down, left behind, and dangerous. It goes without saying that I wasn't taking great care of myself back then. But for what it's worth, I am in a much better place now. At the time that this happened to me, there was an old hospital on the outskirts of town, which I had been sheltering in for a few weeks. I wasn't proud of it, but it kept me off the sidewalks when I had nothing else. Now, I've turned things around and have a family and a better life, but I still remember that night like it was yesterday. It's one of those moments that changed everything, even if I never really want to look back at it. It was a major factor in me getting my life together. The hospital was far enough out of town that no one bothered checking it, and I kept to myself. I didn't break anything, didn't leave a mess, just needed a place to crash where no one would ask me questions and I could keep out of danger. At least that's what I thought it would be when I first started staying there. I spent my days scrounging together food and alcohol, and at night I'd disappear back into the building for rest. There was nobody else that I knew of using the building to shelter in. It was just me. As far as I knew, there was only one entrance that wasn't chained up. This loud door that always made a slamming sound no matter how quietly you tried to close it. The area around the building was overgrown with tall grass. It almost had the appearance of a marsh. One night, when I got back, right away I noticed it smelled different. It was like decay, thick and awful. I couldn't get the smell out of my nose. I figured maybe an animal crawled in somewhere and died, but it seemed too sudden and intense for that. I sat down near my things, rolled some cigarettes and tried to ignore it, but it just kept hitting me in these waves, and at a certain point I could no longer pretend that this wasn't going to be a problem. I got up and started walking around. I went looking for where it was coming from, moving down the hall and checking old rooms. Then I got to the stairwell leading to the basement. The first time I had tried going down there, days before, the steps were blocked by junk, broken chairs, an old gurney, and random garbage. But someone had moved it all. There was a clear path now, like someone had made space to get through. And the smell was clearly coming from down there. I know now I should have left it alone. Instead, I pulled my shirt up over my face and started down the steps. It was dark down there, and all I had was my lighter, which despite what you see in movies is not a great source of light. But it's all I had, so I sparked it up and pressed on. The air was just awful, and it got worse the deeper I went. The basement level was cold, and most of the doors were busted or hanging off their hinges. But one door at the end of the hallway was padlocked shut. The door was barely intact, like the others, but it had been deliberately secured from the outside, and the lock looked recent. As fucked up as I was back at that point in my life, I still knew something was incredibly weird here. Why lock this door shut when everything else had been left to rot? I thought it was possible I was no longer the only person sheltering here, and perhaps this was where the other person was storing their things. But deep down, I didn't believe that. I knew that whatever was in there was the source of the smell. I stepped closer and something caught the corner of my eye. Fresh soil and drag marks in the dust leading right up to the door. That's when I knew for certain that someone had put something in there. I should have walked away, but I didn't make a lot of great decisions back then. I found a broken piece of pipe and wedged it under the weakest looking part of the latch. It took a few tries of me throwing my whole body weight against it in the pitch dark for the latch to finally snap and the door to creak open. I re-sparked my lighter. My shirt had fallen down from my face in the process of busting the latch, and as I opened the door, the smell hit me so hard I gagged. I held my lighter up, and the light flickered against a rolled-up tarp shoved against the back wall. Soil and dark stains covered the thing. I could not believe what I was looking at. I crouched down, pinched the edge of the tarp between my thumb and index finger, and pulled back just enough to see. There was a guy's fucking face under there. Pale, mouth slack, eyes open and glassy. And even more disturbing, he was decomposing. My brain stalled out. It was one thing to know what I was looking at, and a whole other thing to process it. Someone had dragged him down here not long ago. This was a drop spot, a temporary stash. He had clearly been buried elsewhere, dug up and moved. And that meant whoever put him here, they were coming back at some point. Then I heard it. The upstairs door slammed shut. Then, after a few beats of silence, footsteps coming down the stairs at the end of the hall. I barely had time to let off the gas of my lighter before I saw the glow of the flashlight sweeping through the hallway. I backed away from the tarp and out of the room, mind racing. There was only one way out, the stairs, the same way whoever was at the end of the hall had come in. I moved as quickly as I could, careful not to make sound, pressing myself into the shadows and slipping silently into one of the neighboring rooms. The footsteps got closer and then past the room I was in. Then I heard them stop. They were outside the room where the body had been stashed, and now they knew it had been opened. There was this long silence. And then, out of nowhere, whoever it was began a full sprint down the hallway back toward the staircase, up and out of the building. I once again heard the upstairs door open and slam shut. I did not waste any time. I ran down the hall in the dark, keeping low and sneaking up the stairs. I didn't know if this person was gone or coming back with more people or with a weapon or what the hell was going on. As I reached the door, I could hear a car's engine turn on outside and then the tires spinning out on the old pavement. I hit the door full force, shoving it open and sprinting into the night and toward the surrounding woods. I left everything there. I didn't even go back into town. I found a bus station and got the hell out. Didn't tell anyone what I saw, didn't want to know who I almost ran into that night. I'm not proud of that part of my life, and I'd like to think that I'm a different person now who would do something different in that same situation. But at the same time, I remember how desperate I was to stay out of jail and keep a low profile. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had been just a little slower, if that door didn't happen to slam shut every time it was closed and I hadn't seen them approaching me. Having gone through this and being where I am now, I can tell you that when you're living an average middle-class life, the darker side of human nature seems to only exist on TV or in movies. But when you're living like I was, I can tell you from personal experience, it's never more than a couple bad turns away from your reality.